Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 6, Beyond the Wall has aired, and it was another ripper of an episode. So much happened in it. It was incredibly epic. I mean, just visually, the CGI, the amount of stuff that went down. It was a crazy episode, and we're going to break it down piece by piece and see what we thought. The episode begins with the Magnificent Seven embarking on their quest beyond the wall to go and capture White to prove the threat to the rest of Westeros. Now, I think this episode was really good in the fact that you had a lot of major players coming together in this quest, who some of whom haven't met each other before, some of whom have under very different circumstances. And, you know, on their trek north of the wall, they got time to kind of talk things over and, you know, iron out some of their grievances with one another. And we saw Gendry, you know, berating Thoros, saying, "Why did you sell me to the Red Priestess? She almost had me burnt alive," which is a fair complaint. But then the Hound kind of succinctly says to him, "Look, this is so much bigger than, you know, petty politics now. This guy's been dead 6 times. He's not bitching. You know, we just have to bury the hatchet and go on here." And, you know, I think that's fair enough given the stakes are so high these days. I can understand why plenty of characters would have beef with one another. But, you know, as the Hound says, you've just got to pitch together and work together to get through this threat. There's no time for, you know, petty arguments anymore. Jon then tries to return Longclaw to Jorah Mormont because, after all, Jorah Mormont's father, Jeor Mormont, was the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and in Season 1, after Jon saved Jeor from a White attack, Jeor gave Jon Longclaw and had the pommel made from a bear into a direwolf. And Jorah, you know, takes the sword, has a look at it, and he goes, "No, man, it belongs to you." And I think that was a really good scene and, you know, very much the done thing that Jorah would choose to do. You know, even though I think he has redeemed himself enough, and I think ultimately his father would accept him now if he was still alive. I feel like that sword does belong to Jon now. It was given to him freely, and, you know, it's no longer the Mormonts, I think. So I thought that was a good scene, and it was good to see Jon and Jorah on the same page there, and Jorah's just like, "No, dude, you weren't this." Arya and Sansa share a scene together. Arya recalls one of her fond memories of their father, Ned, and then, you know, rounds on Sansa and basically has a go and says, is a great deal your fault that he's dead, which I think is very unfair. I think Arya has really been pretty unhinged this season, and you know, is really lashing out at Sansa for reasons she doesn't understand, and, you know, she doesn't know what Sansa's been through, you know, just because Sansa's kind of been the more proper Stark daughter. I loved it when Sansa turned on Arya and just said, "Look, you wouldn't have survived this shit I've been through." And I think that's true. I think Arya wouldn't have. She, you know, Sansa played it safe and kept her head down and tried to survive and endure great pain because of it, but did ultimately survive. Whereas I think Arya would have ended up getting herself killed. I understand Arya's been through a lot of shit, but I feel like she's, you know, turning on Sansa just isn't the right thing to do, and she really has no evidence really to suggest Sansa's been disloyal to the Starks or, you know, hasn't done enough to try and protect the family. I'll speak more of this later, but yeah, I think there's a lot going on here, and keep that in your mind because we'll go back to that in a bit. North of the wall, Tormund and the Hound have a great scene together. I loved how Tormund just comes up like, "All right, mate," and Sandor's like, "Fuck off." Like, it's just so Sandor. And, you know, he's like, "I don't have a problem with wildlings, I just don't like gingers." And that is true. He did kill Micah in Season 1, the butcher's boy, who was a ginger. So he's not wrong there. He does have a history of hating gingers. But I love that, you know, back and forth between two, you know, hard guys like Sandor and Tormund, you know. And then Tormund reveals how much he's infatuated with Brienne of Tarth. And the Hound's like, "Dude, she damn near killed me. Like, I know that woman, she's tough, believe me." I would really like to see Brienne and Tormund get together. I feel like they would be a weirdly good match for one another. Brienne, you know, she doesn't want to be tied down. She doesn't want to be an atypical, you know, lady of Westeros. She wants to be a knight, and I can't see Tormund stopping her if they're in a relationship. You know, he'd encourage it, if anything. So I think it kind of would be nice. But given how fast things are going and how high the stakes are, I wonder if we'll ever actually see that. Then the Hound sees the mountain that he saw in his vision that looks like an arrowhead, and they realise they're close to their goal. Cut to Dragonstone, where Tyrion and Daenerys are enjoying a cheeky glass of wine by the fire. Basically, they get into kind of an argument. You know, Tyrion saying he's trying to advise her and you know, wants her to stay cool when she goes and sees Cersei in King's Landing. And he says to her, "You've got a temper." And Dany goes, "No, I don't." You know, like thus proving his point. And then, you know, they eventually start talking about the future. And Tyrion says to Daenerys, "Look, you don't have children. You can't have any children, it seems. What's your plan for future generations? How are you going to make sure the world you build isn't destroyed when you die?" And I feel like, given the huge things that happened this episode, this kind of got glossed over. But is it just me, or did Tyrion just suggest Westeros adopt democracy? He suggests the Ironborn have a way of choosing a king, which is a democracy. They have a king's moot where the Greyjoys come together and the people on the Iron Islands come together to choose a new leader. And, you know, it's the Night's Watch also has a similar democratic process where they choose a new Lord Commander. And that kind of works for them. And I feel like, was that a hint there that maybe Dany will establish Westeros' first democracy? Who knows? I hope so. I think, you know, it's not perfect, but democracy is probably better than having monarchies and, you know, having power passed down through families. So maybe we could see Westeros become a democracy by the end of the season. Who knows? But I thought that was a great conversation they had. I feel kind of bad for Tyrion. He really wants Dany to succeed, but he keeps failing her. And, you know, her trust in him seems to have been shaken quite a bit. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, could we see, you know, President of Westeros or Prime Minister of Westeros? Who knows? The Magnificent Seven are then attacked by a giant dead polar bear that appears to be controlled by White Walkers. It has that blue-eyed stare that indicates it's been controlled by the White Walkers. And, you know, obviously it's a fucking polar bear. It kicks their asses until Thoros of Myr and Beric Dondarrion. I love that scene where they both, like, ignite their swords and the fire just comes up. That's so cool. I mean, forget Valyrian steel. I'd take a flaming sword any day. And they manage to stab it and it sets on fire. But before it ultimately dies, it delivers a hard blow to Thoros of Myr, and they have to cauterize the wound. I really like the Hound during that scene. You know, he sees Thoros is under attack by the bear, but he's just terrified of fire and he can't bring himself to help him. And if you notice, when they cauterize the wound with the flaming sword, like, the Hound, like, looks away like, shit, you know. I mean, it's clear he's still very afraid of fire, and who can blame him? But I thought the CGI looked really good in that scene. I feel like a giant undead bear could have been a bit laughable, but I think they did a great job. And I loved how the snow was coming down, so they could only see a few feet in front of them. It was really tense, kind of almost reminded me of The Thing in a way, you know, the horror film. So yeah, I thought that was a cracking scene, but unfortunately Thoros got given a pretty bad wound there. Sansa is asking Littlefinger for help about what Arya knows. Again, you know me, I hate Littlefinger. I've said that pretty much every episode. I want him to get his. And he kind of seemed to have Sansa's best interests there. That was the impression he seemed to give. But he then suggested that maybe Brienne could you know, help the girls out. Like, she would be obliged to stop one from hurting the other. I don't know quite what his goal there was, because in the end Brienne gets sent away by Sansa. I don't know, for a minute I thought he was just going to have, you know, Arya and Brienne fight, and that was why we saw them training in an earlier episode. But no, obviously not. Again, you know, no one trusts Littlefinger. He didn't seem to be doing anything too devious at that point, but I don't trust anything he says. He's clearly just out for himself. North of the Wall, Jorah and Thoros speak to one another about the Siege of Pike. Now, this is an event that's been mentioned quite a few times in past seasons of Game of Thrones. It's first mentioned, I think, in Season 1, when Jory, the captain of Ned Stark's guard, converses with Jaime about the Siege of Pike, and they mention Thoros of Myr charging through with his flaming sword. And it's then mentioned again by Jorah Mormont between him and Barristan Selmy in a later season. And this is something that's been mentioned a few times throughout the seasons. And we finally get to hear Thoris's take on, you know, what he was doing when he went charging through at the Siege of Pike with a flaming sword looking like a hero. And he reveals that he was so drunk he can't remember it. And I think that's a great thing, you know, behind all the myths and legends of heroes of bravery and such, you know, you realise that the truth is often not as legendary as it's often made out to be. And I loved how Thoris had no ego or anything. He was just like, yeah, I was pretty drunk at that point. I don't remember a lot of it. But, you know, we've heard that there could be a prequel spin-off series of Game of Thrones. I would love to see that in action, see Thoris charging through. But I thought that was a great scene, and it was really touching, you know, that Thoris was wounded. I think we all knew at that point he probably wouldn't survive this. And, you know, he just looks at Jorah, and Jorah says, I thought you were the bravest knight I'd ever seen. And he just taps Jorah on the chest and is like, just the drunkest, mate. And I thought that was really cool. I really like Thoris. He's a great guy. Tormund and Jon then spot some White Walker scouts, some white scouts being led by a White Walker. They ambush them, attack them. Jon kills the White Walker, and it's revealed for the first time that if you kill the White Walker who raised the dead up, the dead also die as well. There seems to be a kind of connection there, and only one white is left standing. And that's very interesting. It kind of goes to show if you cut the head off a snake, the body will die. If they could just kill the White Walkers, the rest of the army won't be a problem. And there doesn't seem to be too many White Walkers. So, you know, maybe they stand a chance in that regard. But the White lets off a scream and notifies the rest of the undead army that they've been ambushed. And the undead come charging after the Magnificent Seven. Jon turns to Gendry and is like, book it back to the wall. You need to get a raven to Daenerys. Tell her to come and help us because we are fucked. Gendry runs so fast it would make Forrest Gump proud, all the way back to the wall. I don't really know how long their journey was from the wall. It kind of seemed like Gendry got there kind of too fast, you know? I mean, he had no water, no supplies. He just fucking booked it all the way there. I mean, it seemed a bit unrealistic to me, but okay. And he gets back to the wall, collapses into the arms of Davos, and tells him to send a raven to Daenerys. The undead army chases the Magnificent Six now onto a frozen lake that has a small island in the middle. The lake begins to break apart, and the Six manage to get onto the island, and the undead are forced to wait for the lake to freeze over again in order to keep pursuing them. However, our heroes are surrounded, they can't go anywhere, so they're essentially just on this island waiting for either Daenerys to come and help them or for the ice to freeze again and just be slaughtered. They stay there, it seems like they stay there overnight just waiting. And unfortunately, during that time, Thoros passes away. And I thought that was really sad. I really like Thoros' character. He was the guy that had been bringing Beric back to life 6 times. Maybe he could have done the same for Jon if he died. But now he's dead, so it seems like Melisandre is the only person left who can bring people back to life. So, yeah, I thought that was really sad. And the way Beric gave him his last rites, and, you know, even the Hound kind of looked sad and, you know, was like, shit, I could have saved him from that polar bear if I hadn't been so afraid. But yeah, fare thee well for Thoros. You were a great character. It was great to see you brought to life in the TV show Game of Thrones. Sansa then has a scene with Brienne where she says there's no way she's returning to King's Landing while Cersei is queen, and she wants Brienne to go in her stead representing the Starks. And so it seems like in the next episode, a lot of our main characters are going to be meeting at King's Landing, and Brienne will be there in Sansa's stead. That'll be interesting. Not only will she get to see Tormund, you know how much I ship their relationship, but she'll also see Jaime. And it's unfair for Jaime, you know. Cersei's being hit on by Euron. He's always had a thing with Brienne, and now Tormund's coming in. I mean, poor Jaime. He just can't catch a break. But at least he's got Bronn. Sansa then sneaks into Arya's room, finds her little knapsack full of people's faces. That was pretty weird, I've got to be honest. And Arya confronts her. And there, it really looked like for a moment Arya was going to kill Sansa and take her place. And, you know, this is, again, I've said, I really think Arya's in the wrong here. You know, having a go at Sansa. You know, they've both been through some terrible shit. They should be on the same side. And Sansa keeps a level head and is just like, are you crazy? But, you know, Arya uh, she seems to really hate Sansa at this point. However, some people have speculated that this might be a plan by Arya to kind of double bluff Littlefinger and make him think he's succeeded in driving a wedge between the Stark girls, when really, you know, Arya is on Sansa's side. I hope that is the case. I don't know if the writers will have thought to have done that. Maybe Arya has just turned into kind of a psychopath after everything she's been through. But it would be great if it turned out this was all a ruse and Littlefinger, you know, totally gets played by Sansa and Arya. I hope that is the case. Dany gets the message from the Night's Watch that Jon and his gang need help. Tyrion's like, you can't go out there, you should stay here and rule, do nothing, you know, it's unfortunate, but they knew the risk. She's like, fuck you, Tyrion, I've already got my Targaryen winter-line coat on, I'm going out there. I have to say, I thought she looked great, like the costume design on her outfit for going up north of the wall looked really cool, you know, people be joking about the Targaryen fashion line and stuff, but fair play to the costume designers of Game of Thrones. I think they do a great job in bringing the costumes to life. The Hound realises that the ice has frozen back up and the undead begin to march upon it, and it looks like it's game over for our heroes. They fight bravely. If you notice, they weren't using their regular weapons. They were using kind of crudely made weapons with obsidian blades. Like Tormund, I think, was using a kind of axe that just had like a chunk of obsidian on the end with a sharpened edge. Jorah was using like obsidian daggers. So that's how they were able to kill the Whites with just a couple of hits. So I like that attention to detail. You know, Jon obviously had his Valyrian steel sword and Beric was using his fire sword, which is very effective against Whites. Tormund damn near died. I was so worried for him then. I'm a big fan of Tormund. I like the guy, he's funny. He's a great fighter, he's loyal, and I really thought it was game over for him then when he was just getting overwhelmed by the Whites. He took that head wound, you know, he began to get dragged into the lake, but luckily the Hound came to his rescue. I wonder if that was the Hound kind of feeling bad that Thoros had died on his watch, and he saw Tormund was about to be killed, and he was like, not on my fucking watch. It was also great to see the Hound wielding Gendry's hammer. You know, the Hound's such a big guy, a hammer's a perfect weapon for him. He was just knocking fools out left, right and centre. He didn't need a Valyrian steel or obsidian sword. He, you know, was just using pure strength just to smash the Whites apart. And I thought that was really, you know, lended to his fighting style. Just as it seems like it's game over, Dany arrives in the nick of time and begins just blowing the Whites out with her dragon fire. She has her 3 dragons with her. She's on Drogon. It looks like it's game, set, match. Didn't think of that, did you, White Walkers? She's just, you know, decimated the battlefield. The fire is breaking up the ice again, preventing the rest of the army from getting to the island. It looks like the day is won, but it seems like the White Walker did anticipate the appearance of dragons. He brings out a spear, and if you notice, he had 3 spears with him, 1 for each dragon, presumably. And he unfortunately takes down Viserion. It was really heartbreaking to see a dragon die. I've mentioned that, you know, I think a dragon die would be as, you know, hard to watch as a main character dying. But the way Viserion was taken down, it was like, you could see like a kind of liquid like pouring from his chest that I assume was like the kind of oil, if you like, that is inside dragons that ignites their dragon's fire. And it just came like pouring out of him, and he came down really ungracefully and just smashed into the lake. You know, and Dany was just like, shit, that was the closest thing I have to children. You know, I've just lost a child. Jon sees him goes down, goes mental, just starts hacking away at Whites. The rest of the heroes get up onto Drogon, and I loved how the Hound just like clamped the White that they'd kidnapped onto one of Drogon's scales. But yeah, you know, a heavy price they paid there to get away. Jon then sees the Night King prepared to launch another spear at Drogon. He's like, shit, get away, get away. Just as Dany's about to take off on Drogon, Jon's about to climb up, but then gets pushed down into the ice by some Whites. And again, I thought he was dead then. I was like, shit, is that the end of Jon Snow? I really thought, you know, there was going to be no one to bend the knee for the North then. I loved how, as Drogon was trying to take off, he was kind of falling through the ice and struggling to get airborne. And, you know, obviously the Night's King was throwing the javelin. Luckily it missed and they got away. But, you know, not without seemingly losing Jon and without Daenerys losing Viserion. With his last remaining strength, Jon manages to pull himself out of the frozen lake, you know, out of the ice that he fell through. And I loved how, you know, Kit Harington's acting there. He really looked so exhausted and cold, and he was staggering along using long claws, like almost like a walking stick. And the Whites turn and see him, and just as it looks like Jon is about to make his last stand, from nowhere, Benjen arrives, gives him his horse, and fends off the Whites to give Jon a head start in getting back to the wall. Good on you, Benjen. You haven't had a lot of screen time in Game of Thrones, but you've been a very valuable player. A lot of main characters would have died were it not for you. Rest in peace, sir. Your watch has ended. Jon makes it back to the wall, falls into Davos's arms, and Davos, you know, gets into a nice snug bed with a warm fire, and, you know, gets him heated up again. I hope he got him a nice hot mug of cocoa. And then Dany comes in and sees Jon's scars and, you know, seems to see evidence for the fact that he was killed and brought back to life. And then the two share a kind of touching scene together where Dany's obviously devastated at the loss of Viserion. And Jon says to her, I'll bend the knee to you. You know, you proved you're a worthy queen. You know, I will be your ally. I will fight alongside you. And, you know, I thought that was quite a moving scene. I thought Daenerys' acting, Emilia Clarke's acting, as Daenerys was very good. You could tell she was really broken up, but also kind of happy to have saved Jon. There was a bit, am I the only one who noticed this, but when she held Kit Harington's hand, it cut to Kit Harington and he was looking at her, but he had absolutely no movement on his face at all. And I thought for a minute he died, and like she was holding his dead hand. I was like, oh God, you know, he's passed away. And then he blinks and you're like, oh, okay, he's okay. But am I the only person that thought that? I don't know, it just seemed like a kind of weird take. I'm surprised they used that one. Yeah, it seemed a bit odd to me, but overall I thought the scene was good. I thought Emilia Clarke did a good job of looking tearful, and, you know, yeah, it looks like they do have the hots for each other, and it's been very strongly suggested that Jon is actually a Targaryen, a legitimate Targaryen at that, so she's actually his aunt and he's her nephew, which usually in a TV show would suggest that two related characters aren't going to get together, but given that Jaime and Cersei are twins, I think it's pretty likely we'll see Jon and Dany have some action. The last scene of the episode shows the Whites dragging Viserion's corpse out of the lake, and as I predicted, the Night's King comes down and resurrects the dragon as an undead dragon now, no longer a fire dragon but an ice dragon. Now, I kind of thought this might happen because, if you don't know, George R. R. Martin has a short children's story he wrote called The Ice Dragon. And, you know, even without that, it always occurred to me that if a dragon died, the White Walkers could resurrect it. And so, you know, I kind of thought that this would happen. It really ups the stakes now. The White Walkers have a freaking dragon on their side. We're going to see a fire-breathing dragon fight an ice dragon, it seems. And I wonder, you know, rather than kill the undead Viserion, will they have to kill the Night's King in order to break his hold over Viserion and allow Viserion to truly die? Who knows? But, you know, that was great to see the way its eye opened up and it was that bright blue. You know, I love that effect. So we'll see. It looks like they're going to have to contend with the dragon now as well as White Walkers. Now, as much as I enjoyed this episode, and I really did, I thought the spectacle of it was incredible. You know, the CGI looked fantastic. I thought the acting was spot on, except for that weird scene between Jon and Daenerys. But, you know, the fighting, the choreography, the deaths, I thought it was a really good episode. I'm not trying to demean it at all. However, I have seen a lot of people online discussing the fact that in this season especially, people seem to be able to move around Westeros just so quickly. Westeros is a huge continent, you know, it's meant to be kind of the size of Europe. In one episode it suggested that it took a month from someone to get to King's Landing to Winterfell. You know, this is not a country that's easy to traverse, and yet people seem to be doing exactly that in this season. And I do appreciate that the show is wrapping up. We've only got a few episodes left. Things have to, be done quickly. But at the same time, I can appreciate that some people are finding the pacing just a bit too fast. Just huge things are happening, whereas it used to take an entire season for payoffs that we've seen in just average episodes of season 7. Like the battle of Jaime versus Daenerys usually would have been like an end of season episode, but we got it, in the early season of this one. So yeah, a lot of stuff is happening. You really have to kind of stay on board. It feels like you're going on a wild ride. And I can appreciate that people are, saying it's kind of unrealistic how quickly people are getting from A to B and information is travelling. And I think even the showrunners have admitted that this is something they're having to do in order to wrap up the series in time. I saw some other people also say that it seemed unrealistic for Gendry to be able to get back to the wall that quickly, and it seemed kind of like a Deus Ex Machina for Benjen to just appear and help Jon Snow. Now, here are my thoughts on that, okay? Yes, I agree that it was kind of unrealistic for Gendry to get word to Daenerys that quickly, when he was with Jon Snow. Here's how I think it could have been done better. I have to admit, I didn't come up with this myself. I read this online, so credit to whoever did that. But someone suggested that this episode could have been a bit tighter if we'd seen Bran watching Jon's expedition, through the weirwood net, and he then sees them get into trouble. And so he has a maester send a letter to Daenerys, but address it as though it's from Jon. So Daenerys gets this letter before Jon ever has a chance to send it, and goes to help them. And then when Daenerys arrives, Jon's like, what are you doing here? And she's like, I got your letter. Jon's like, what letter? But, Bran was seeing it all, so he sent the letter to make sure she'd get there in time. I think that would have been a good use of Bran. He's been pretty weird this season, hasn't done much. I think that would have been a cool way to show how much of an asset he could be to Jon, and to the forces of the living. So that would have been cool. Maybe they didn't have time to do that. Maybe they just didn't think of it. I don't know. But I think that would have gone a long way to make the episode just feel a bit more grounded. And here's a little something I thought of that I think could have helped a bit. A lot of people had a problem with Benjen just appearing at the end there. I think it would have been cool if you had a couple of shots, just like a second each, of a mysterious hooded figure on a horse following Jon's expedition, spying on them without their knowledge. And initially you would think maybe this was a White Walker scout, reporting back to the White Walkers to warn them of this ambush. But then it would be revealed at the end that it's actually Benjen, because obviously he can't go south of the wall. His domain is north of the wall. So it makes sense that if, he heard that there was some kind of scouting going on, he would go and have a look at it and, see what was going on. And when he finds out it's Jon, rescue him. So, I feel like they just could have added that to make it seem a bit less like Benjen just popping out of nowhere. But again, they didn't, so whatever. But I think that would have been a nice thing to add. Something else people have been discussing is whether or not the Night's King knew that Dany was going to arrive with her dragons. He had those spears ready to kill the dragons, so it kind of seems like he was. And some people wondering if this was all a big trap set up by the Night's King to get hold of a dragon, and that he could have killed, Jon and his men whenever he wanted, but he was waiting for Daenerys to arrive so he could get hold of a dragon. And that's very interesting, We don't know much about the White Walkers at all, how much they know about the rest of Westeros. It's been kind of hinted that the Night's King can walk like Bran, and if that's true, that means he would have a wealth of knowledge and he would be able to make very elaborate plans in order to help him and his kind take over Westeros. So I'll be intrigued to see that. I don't know if that will be developed. Maybe there's not time to develop much on the White Walkers and what they know, and it will just be left up to speculation. But I do like the idea that this was all a trap, and that really he was kind of allowing Jon to survive as long as he did in order to get Daenerys to come there, and really he played them all. I think that would be an interesting twist. But anyway, overall, I thought it was a very strong episode. I can't wait for the next one, see how this season wraps off. I think it's going to be big. Let me know what you thought. Did you love this episode? Did you find it a bit jarring, the amount of, time skipping that was going on and people getting from A to B so quickly? Let me know what you think the future holds for our characters. And I'll see you next time on the next review. Vala Morghulis.